Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Dan. First of all, let me wish our listeners a happy Diwali. This morning, I have with me Mr. Anil Weeraratne, who lives in Australia and is an experienced professional in manufacturing industry and in the banking sector. With over 44 years of experience, he now serves as a consultant in many projects and consultancy fairs for Australian, Asian and Middle Eastern countries. Welcome to the studios, Anil.
Thank you, Dan, and good morning to you.
Today, I would like to discuss about Sri Lanka's potentials and the consultancies that Sri Lankans can get involved. With your international exposure and multinational experiences, how do you see Sri Lanka as an emerging economy?
Thank you, Dan. I suppose I see Sri Lanka as a country that's on the cusp of getting better at what it's doing. But I think it's got a way to go. It certainly does not lack the people power in terms of brain power to get things done. But I'm very afraid that Sri Lankan organizations tend to be rather insular in their thinking and tend not to go outside as often as they should. I think that's probably, in a nutshell, that's where I see the Sri Lankan economy being right now. Structurally, there are problems in the Sri Lankan economy. I think that's well understood. In the export markets, we are getting hammered by Bangladesh and Vietnam in the textile trade, for instance, and even in our natural product export marketplaces, we're not doing as well as we probably could. Why? I think the reasons are multiple. The reasons come from failure of government to do what needs to be done, failure of industry to innovate and change and do things differently, and failure of people to understand what needs to happen, and for people to change their way of thinking. And I think that's one of the things I like to do in the work that I do, is to try and change people and try and bring about some degree of positive change to the people I work with in this country.
Now, when we talk about change, do you feel that Sri Lanka and its people are easy or hard to change?
I think they're very hard to change. I think there's an entrenched mindset, a mindset that is probably driven by its own history and the societal attitudes that exist in this country. It's very much a command and control structure here. What the boss says goes. Therefore, it's very hard to find younger people come up with ideas because they are afraid for their jobs. They're afraid to make the next move. That's unfortunate. But I think it is breaking down. There are some younger leaders now emerging in industry that are showing the way, and I think that's really laudable to see that happen. I just wish more of it would happen faster. I guess I'm getting impatient about the pace of change that's taking place in this country. But can Sri Lankans change? Yes, they can. Will they change? I think they will, and slowly. Will it be fast enough to catch up with the rest of the world? Questionable. I think in that context, unless Sri Lanka gets its act together, it will always lag behind. We're very good at talking the talk, very good at talking about lots of things we can and do, and we will do. But my goodness me, Dan, very few of us actually do walk the talk. And that's been my experience, in 7-8 years of coming back to this country and having a look at what's going on. Yeah, that's my judgment. After talking to business leaders around this country, I think there's a lot of good wishes and a lot of good intentions, but not very much happens.
My understanding is that we need to innovate as a nation. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think innovation is key to it. And I think innovation starts with the education system. When I think about what's happening in the world of commerce internationally, and when I think about what's the disruptive technologies that are being used around the world, you look at renewable energy, for instance, look at the impact that science is having on in that particular sphere. We need to have science graduates come out of our schools. We need to have people thinking about science in that sense, that science can actually lead to very, very worthwhile and fulfilling careers and jobs in the future. And that's where innovation starts. You need to build a mindset that can change. And the mindset needs to be accompanied by the technical skills to innovate. It's great to say, yes, we can go ahead and do something fantastic. Let's innovate down path X, Y, Z. If you haven't got the technical skills to deliver on that, it's useless thought. It's just another example of walking the walk but not talking the talk. So I think that we have to start with the education system. Get more kids into the science faculties. Get them really moving. Invest in them. The governments need to invest in the science faculties. Provide them the facilities, provide them the training, provide them the opportunity to go overseas and study or do whatever needs to be done in order to bring those skills on board. Then you can build an innovative culture. And yes, of course, it comes down through startups and funding of startup businesses and all those things happening as well. And I can see it happening now. When I talk to the children of my friends who are doing this sort of stuff, Yes, there are things happening, but it's small and it's not quite strong enough yet to be very, very valuable.
If we look at the country and the country's perspective, what are the strengths and weaknesses that you see in Sri Lanka?
Oh, I think I can give you a list a mile long. But let me focus on only a few. I think let's focus only a few things. I think our strengths revolve around our capacity to be able to do things. We can do things. If we're led properly, we can do things. If we're given the right opportunities, we can do things. But we've got an educated workforce. Confess, when I look at the quality of people in organizations today, generally, by and large, I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed. They will hold their own anywhere in the world in the context of the skills, the native skills they have and the professionalism they display. But without the right level of leadership, the right type of leadership, that is not going to be very much use. I think that we have, as a country, we have an inability to really have a customer focus in what we do. I think that's because we don't have a voice of the customer appearing. And the voice of a customer is a very powerful thing. It can galvanize votes. It can change political parties. It can create change that customers want, that consumers, and we don't have a strong voice. You look at the banking sector, for instance, here where you've got so many banks. Competition, I don't see as being a very, very strong point in the sector. Yet there needs to be. Why doesn't that happen? Why isn't there stronger competition? Perhaps because the consumers are too compliant. They take what they get and they don't really fight for better deals. Maybe that's the case. I think we have a weakness in terms of our structures, our traditional structures. We're very, very traditional organization, or maybe work in traditional organizational ways. I think the idea of the inverted pyramid doesn't exist in this country. The idea that top management are actually required to support the work of the people who work for them. So in fact, the bosses are at the very bottom of the tree, not the top of the tree. That's what I mean by the inverted pyramid. Now, does that happen? Not to any great extent in this country. But yet you look at the best performing organizations and best performing countries in the world, and this is a thought process that sits in there. The chief of a business unit is there to make sure that his or her subordinates have the tools and equipment and resources they need to get their job done correctly. Their failure is his or her failure. So that's what drives them. And that's what I mean by it. And that's not there. I think we have a problem in terms of we don't think lean in this country. When I look around, and especially when I look around at government and at government departments, and certainly when I look around quite a few of the businesses that are around, we tend to be overstaffed, well and truly overstaffed. Now, I understand that with a low wage rate, a relatively low wage rate over here, and the need to provide employment, that there is a need to have people working. But there has to be a balance drawn somewhere. I'm not advocating wholesale reduction of staff in businesses, not at all. But let's find a way to make them more productive, and let's find a way to use their skills and talents in a more innovative way. Let's find new markets to go into. Let's not simply absorb them into our current work that we're doing, into our current markets. Let's find something else for them to do that is productive and worthwhile and adds value to the country and to the economy in total terms. I think that needs to happen. I think also there is, from a weakness point of view, I think there is insufficient empowerment of people. We don't challenge. In this country, we don't challenge the supervisors. We dare not challenge them. I think we do, but in a very, very muted sense. It's difficult. It's very difficult for a young person to get their ideas up. I was talking to a group of young people the other day when I was here the last time, and they were saying, "Look, we'd like to say things, but we don't want to, because we will simply get howled down. And the older people in the organization will not listen to us. That's a shame. Our young people have a lot of ideas behind them, a lot of energy, a lot of ideas. Hey, we need to capitalize on that. We need to bring them up. We need to bring them to the fore and get them going. That's what's required, I think."
Well, what you suggest is that we need to think out of box, generally.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, with your international exposure and experience all around the world, is there a special reason for you to focus on Sri Lankan opportunities?
Well, I think there is. It's an interesting one that I have been very fortunate and been able to work overseas for a long period of time in different operating environments and with different cultures. Consulting for me is something I used to do between jobs, and each became a scratch, and now it's become a full-time occupation, if you like. But it's something that's always been a learning environment for me, and I've learned a hell of a lot in a long career. I think it's time, and I've lived most of my life offshore, overseas. I'd like to give something back. I like to come to this country and try and pass on my knowledge, my experience to organizations who are prepared to listen and who are prepared to take positive steps forward. It's my little way of giving something back to my home country. And that by itself is something that I really like. I enjoy doing. That's quite a driver for me.
Now, when we talk about the opportunities and the capacity building for our younger generation, do you ever advise migration?
I'm not certain that migration per se is the right answer. I think that what you find in terms of giving opportunities to young people is you certainly want them to get an exposure to the broader world so that they understand the business and operating cultures that exist elsewhere, and not simply through books or through the internet. There's nothing to beat the physical presence and physical activity in another country. But go there with the intention of coming back here and bringing the learnings back. For that to happen, this country needs to provide opportunity for the kids here to actually want to come back. Yes, we have a lot of our children go overseas and study at universities in Australia, in New Zealand, in the UK, in the US, in Europe, etc. A lot of kids go offshore and do that. Do all of them come back? I don't think very many do, because they live and work over there. Why don't they come back to this country? I'd like to see them come back. I'd like to see the older generation, the people like me or my generation who left in the 70s and early 80s and 90s, who've been living overseas, I'd like them to come back, invest their time, their money, their effort, their intellect into this country. And why not? We have a peaceful society, things are going very well here, economic growth is good. Why don't we come back? Why don't people come back and do more? I think that's what should happen. But certainly education, sending people offshore, migration for the sake of migration, leaving and going forever, no, that's not the way to build this country. You've got to give them excuses to come back, reasons to come back here.
In Coffee with Dan, this morning, I have Mr. Anil Weeraratne. He's an experienced professional in manufacturing industry and the banking sector. He presently lives in Australia, and with his well over 44 years of experience, he now serves as a consultant in project consultancy with Sri Lanka, Australia, Asian and Middle Eastern countries. Projects and different businesses, and we are talking today on Sri Lanka's potentials in development. Now, Anil, turning back to our discussion, where do you see as structural issues within Sri Lanka businesses and the economy as a whole?
I think the structural issues. There are structural issues in this country, but in general, I think it comes down to bureaucracy and over reliance on bureaucratic systems and processes that exist not simply within government but also within private businesses. I think it comes down to the entrenched mindset that people in this country have, the leading countries in this country have, where they're not prepared to change as rapidly as they should in order to keep pace with what's happening elsewhere in the world. I think that from a structural perspective, we need to get our education systems right, we need to get our health systems right, we need to get our transport and logistics systems right. Those are absolutely vital. And let me turn to another subject, the subject of food security in this country. I have seen some statistics, admittedly some years old now, that seem to indicate that we were a nation of undernourished people, that we were not producing and eating and consuming sufficient food to keep ourselves going. And I've also heard from people in the education sector where they find school children who fall asleep in the afternoon at their desks. Why? Because they haven't got the energy to keep going. What are we doing? If that's the reality, what are we doing from a structural perspective? We need to get our transport right. We need to get our food production right. We need to get nutrition into these young people so they can go on and become good at education, so they can go on and start innovating and learn. We don't want to build a class of people who are unable to continue this process. So I think that's an issue. We need to get our transport systems right. When you look at the amount of food that is wasted because it can't move from where it is produced to where it is consumed, that's a shame that it happens. That's an absolute shame that happens. We look at education systems. How many kids pass out through the O levels and A levels each year? Over 200,000 of them. How many places do we have in our universities? About 25,000. What do the rest of these kids do? They go and do a course here and a course there and something else. It doesn't work. It doesn't help. We need to invest in those things. We don't invest in the future of this country. And the future is our young people. You know, we have got to do that. And that to me is one of the biggest structural weaknesses that we have in this country. And that's holding us back. Health systems. We've got good hospitals, good committed doctors. Do we have enough of them? I don't think so. It doesn't look like that. Yeah. At least on the positive side, I think you have a financial system in this country that's very robust. It is a strong, well-controlled, regulated finance industry. And that's very positive. Because as long as you can guarantee commerce between two parties, you've got a financial system that works and is the glue that holds things together. That's good. But yet I think we have too many banks, too many finance companies, and there's not enough competition in that area. Let's address them one by one. I think again from a structural point of view, when in the time of President Rajapaksa, he talked about the Chintanya, the mind, the Chintanya. I thought that was a wonderful idea, very aspirational, lots of concepts about different hubs, but I thought it was too many things at once. You know, okay, I think this government and I think this country needs to focus on doing a few things, but do those few things very, very well indeed. Not try and be everything to everybody. Fix things and fix things properly. Take one area at a time, fix it, move on to the next. Yes, pace of development will be slower than people want, but it'll be more sustainable. I think that makes a difference.
If we talk about the private sector, how do you feel local businesses can benefit by adopting the sorts of approaches that you would advocate?
I think that local businesses consult in a number of different areas, you know, that range from profit and cost management through performance management, do some executive coaching and things of that nature. But I think the real idea is that you don't pick any one of those techniques in isolation. When you talk about a consulting assignment or any sort of business assignment in this country or any country for that matter, it tends to be an aggregation of different techniques that you pull together as a consultant in order to create a solution for a particular client. Having said that, and you can go to any textbook in the world and you can find a list of 150 different consulting techniques and different consulting services and products. They're all good. They've all got their place. But you've got to learn to pick the eyes out of the really important ones and use them. When I think about the main areas that I focus in, which is cost and profit management and in performance management, I think the benefit to businesses is, okay, first of all, you get a very, very clear view of what competition is like. What is your current competitive position? If you don't understand that, if you don't understand what your price points are, if you don't understand your supply and demand characteristics of your business, if you don't understand at what price a customer is going to walk away from you, if you don't understand where a customer sees value in the service that you provide, then you don't understand your competitive space. And if you don't understand your competitive space, how on earth can you compete in it? So learn about that. And that comes through the performance management side, it comes through the profit management side, it comes through a whole bunch of different techniques that one can use. Certainly I think this country needs to have a better understanding of the costs of its products and services. We tend to use very old-fashioned financial analytics in businesses these days. Still do. The rest of the world has moved on. The rest of the world is using big data like you would not believe. It is using very advanced analytical techniques to understand its own business dynamics. So I think that becomes important. So what can they benefit from? They can learn and have better understanding of their own business dynamics, and that makes sense. They can learn how to better use their resources. The land, labor, and capital. We need to use what we purchase as effectively as we can. So one of the techniques that they can learn through this process, how do I best use my resources? Be they people resources, be they capital resources, non-people resources. How can I use them better? How can I make sure I get value from the work that they do? So it comes this whole sense of how to identify what is value adding and what is not value adding. And when you think about what's not value adding, in whose eye is something not value adding? In your eye as a business leader? Or in your customer's eye, because he or she's the person who's paying for the product that you're getting at the end of the day. These definitions of value and those questions come into play. Those, I think, are the main things that companies can gain by talking to consultants and bringing in the techniques that they can use and adopting the techniques that they use to make things better. And mind you, it can be any consulting organization. They all have the same ideas. They all have the same. They apply them differently. Yes, they may group them differently. But at the end of the day, their role is to help businesses move forward and help businesses get better at what they do. And yes, it's all possible. Sorry.
Yes. Now, in filling those lacunas and gaps, how could Sri Lankan business entrepreneurs learn from various multi-jurisdictional experiences?
I think that's a very good question, Dan. How can they learn? They can learn by in a couple of ways. They can learn through actually going to other jurisdictions and seeing how things happen. Nothing wrong with the old study tour. If you send the right people, they will come back with gold. You can arrange for cross-border exchange of people. So yeah, I mean, when I was working in the Middle East, we sent bankers from the Middle East to, I think it was Pakistan, and we brought bankers from Pakistan to the Middle East as a formal exchange of staff between two completely different banks in two completely different territories. Why? So you can learn from each other. So that sort of cross-cultural communication becomes important. You can engage more in international forums. If you as an organization, you are an export-oriented organization, you must have an international outlook. It means you must travel. You must be able to travel. You must be able to go for seminars, for conferences, for trade shows, see what's available, see what's around there. What can you use and bring back? What nuggets are there that you can use and bring back? Form strategic relationships and partnerships with other organizations. Even your international competitors, form relationships with them, because they may be good at some things that you're not good at. And you may be good at something they're not good at. Start looking at where you can move work around to maximize the benefit you get from it. A number of different ways in which that can be done. Bottom line, internationalize your thinking and move out of a simply Sri Lankan mindset. Then you can make hay, if you like.
Well, this morning I was joined in Coffee with Dan, Mr. Anil Weeraratne, an experienced professional in manufacturing industry and in the banking sector. He presently lives in Australia, and with well over 44 years of experience, he now serves as a consultant to many projects around the world. And we were talking about Sri Lanka's potentials in development. Let me thank you, Anil, for being here in Coffee with Dan today.
My pleasure, Dan.